Welcome to Summerween, episode 1. It's 96 degrees outside, but it feels like 101. I don't know what that is in Celsius. You can figure it out.
I'm Maggie. I'm your host.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, you're
sorry.
on a roll there.
I'm sorry. I'm Maggie. I'm your host. This is Cam. He's, I guess, the co-host.
Ooh, am I? Welcome back for Summerween 2023. We did this last year. We did about 10 horror movies through the summer months when it hit 100 degrees because we were manifesting fall. We're doing that again this year.
Yep.
And this year, we're starting off with a bang. If you haven't seen our infographic, by the way, advertising Summerween, I put a lot of work into it.
It looks really good. You did a nice job.
It's over on Instagram.
Our little promo.
Yeah,
it's good.
It'll be on YouTube, too.
What if we made that into a poster?
What if?
That would be
cool.
That'd be really cool. Anyway, sorry. I just had that idea at this moment. I was like, what if I derailed the conversation?
What a good on-mic discussion.
Yeah, I think so.
So the first movie for Summerween this year, we go for movies that will freak us out, either old favorites, new things. Last year, some of the best ones were listener recommendations. So if you're listening to us, you can email us, Substack, whatever, Instagram. And if you're watching us on YouTube, throw us some recommendations in the comments.
For real, please do.
So the first one this year is a legend. I've known about this movie since it came out in 2008, but I'd never seen it.
Neither had I.
And it had such majesty and mystique about it. And
right.
I never thought I could do found footage. We did some found footage movies last year for Summerween, and that was kind of the first time I jumped into this subgenre of horror.
Right.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it would give me a headache, and it didn't.
Right,
any more
yeah.
than, well, I found out actually I just get headaches anyway all the time.
It's unrelated.
It wasn't the found
fine.
footage. It's my brain. So that sort of freed us, and now we're jumping into the subgenre again. So this week we are talking about Cloverfield.
I was so excited because I knew about the cult following of this movie, and I knew how big it was, but I knew almost nothing about it. I knew that it was found footage. I knew that it was in New York. And I knew that there was something to do with aliens only because we had seen 10 Cloverfield Lane when that came out. For context, this came out in 2008. Cam and I were really too young to see this, which is why we didn't see it. But we had this opportunity to see it at Alamo Drafthouse in 35 millimeter, and it was awesome. It was a packed theater. This guy came out at the beginning and gave the sweetest, most genuine introduction to this movie ever. And it was a really great experience. I mean, we weren't necessarily planning on including this in our Summerween, but it was so good. And we were like, this has to be how we start off Summerween.
But those are the best episodes.
Absolutely.
The ones we don't schedule.
Yes, right. I have lots to say about this, but I think it's best if you kind of start off with, what you had planned.
Yeah, and even before we jump into the sort of organized notes, just as a general impressions thing, I didn't know anything about this movie except for its reputation. And now, after last year, we did an episode on The Batman, which went up on YouTube last week, actually.
Oh, yeah,
that was directed by Matt Reeves. And as I was putting together the YouTube version of that, kind of tightening up the episode, the audio, pulling a bunch of photos that cycle in the background, I love his style so much. I love the things he pays attention to. And for Cloverfield being so much earlier in his career, I didn't know if this would feel more kind of rough and tumble if he hadn't had the time to develop that taste yet.
Right.
But I thought it was just as punchy and punishing.
Absolutely.
As the Batman was.
Honestly, more. I was more emotionally invested in this than I was in the Batman.
Because if I had known he made this movie and then found out, the Cloverfield director's doing a Batman movie,
I might have been kind of disappointed in the Batman movie.
Or it would have hit my expectations instead of so exceeding them because I didn't know Matt Reeves.
Because the Batman was it blew our minds when we saw it. Yeah,
And we've seen a lot of horror movies at this point. We seek out the screwed up ones. I think we like that sort of challenge of really trying to bother each other.
I'm at the point where it's kind of hard to scare me. So it's exciting when it does happen.
It's been years, I think. A couple funny games last year during Summerween. That one bothered me.
Yeah.
The Strangers, we've had a couple.
The Strangers is pretty scary. That's a scary movie.
Sinister, honestly. We've had a couple that have bothered us.
But for the most part, I see a movie and I really enjoyed that, but I'm I wasn't scared.
Cloverfield bothered me.
Right. And it wasn't even that it was scary. I mean, there were parts that were pretty scary, but it was so upsetting. And not in the way that Funny Games was upsetting. That's a totally different thing. And I still, that's one of my favorite episodes we've ever done.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with
We sound shell-shocked.
And that movie was really a lot, and I will never watch it again. This movie, I don't know if I would watch it again, but it was really upsetting for reasons that I'll get into. But I mean, the main thing is that it was found footage done in a really good way. Do you want to talk about the found footage?
Yeah. So I think something to point out is that the movie's 85 minutes.
Yeah.
Because all great horrors,
as all horror should be,
around 90. Yeah.
You know what else is 80 minutes? Evil Dead. Just
exactly. Yeah. And I think the Descent, the Ritual, a lot of the ones we've talked about in the last year or so that we've loved have been within that wheelhouse. Occasionally you get something like Terrifier 2 that just springboards past that. But
right, but that's different. Or mostly. Like Ari Aster's, which are like 3 hours long. But those are like their own subgenre.
So yeah, this one, maybe we can start with just sort of a discussion of horror a little looser, because I want to talk about fear for a second. Sure. Because when we think of horror as a genre, I think people focus in on jump scares.
Right.
I think that's when we brought up horror to someone the other day, we're talking about movies, and they started talking about jump scares. Yeah. And that's not the first time that's happened. I think that's how most people identify with the genre, and that's fine.
Right, because it's when you haven't like seen much horror before, like your first experience is usually with some kind of jump scary movie, and it really affects you because you're not used to jump scares.
It's the most identifiable feature, I think. Yes. And it sort of crystallizes the genre and this sensation. It's this one moment of shock, surprise, terror, whether it's the reveal of a monster or some sort of jump scare.
I was going to say, it doesn't matter what it is. Like some people are afraid of ghosts, some people are afraid of old people, some people are afraid of monsters, whatever. But a jump scare is universal. It doesn't matter what the thing is at the end.
And even though I don't think Cloverfield is a jump scare movie, there are moments where things come out of nowhere.
Totally,
but it's more important, all of the feelings I just described. Not the label I'm putting on them, but that feeling of being stunned and startled and genuinely terrified. Cloverfield made me feel that throughout the movie. Yeah. And I think extending or protracting that feeling is incredibly difficult to pull off. Yeah. But it's also dangerous. Yeah. Because my first inclination here was to say that it extends that moment of that moment of terror and fear for a full 85 minutes. But it's not. That's not what the movie does. And even if it tried to, that wouldn't work. Because as an audience member, I think you'd grow numb or indifferent. Right. If it was just shocking and scaring you every second it would be like a music video. It wouldn't really hold you. Yeah. You wouldn't have that level of investment.
I see.
So then the kind of second round realization is that what Cloverfield does is what you and I keep asking for in movies. And it does it perfectly. We've talked about The Shining, The Exorcist, and The Witch. Yeah. I think those are on our Mount Rushmore.
They are.
Because they all take, the better part of an hour to develop the family, the characters, and the stakes.
Slow burns.
They give some real time to developing the characters. And in those movies, things slowly descend into horror and mania, which gives you a feeling of your head kind of slipping under the water.
Right.
But that feeling of drowning is so much more stressful because you've seen the person fighting to keep their head above water for an hour.
Right, and you're so invested by the time it happens.
Cloverfield breaks those rules, but comes to the same point. I think it evokes those same feelings in you because it really turns on a dime. Yeah. You have 20 minutes?
I was going to say, it's about 20 minutes of, not horror movie at all.
Character work at the party. You have that. And then when it turns, when the attack begins and the city falls to shit, it turns on a dime here. Right. Things fall apart in about a minute and they don't let up after that.
No. I mean, there are moments where it slows down a bit, where we have moments of reflection and deciding what to do next. But there's still the tension and the unknown factor that keeps it tense, that you don't know what's going to happen next.
And that's exactly the balance I wanted to get to.
Yeah, because they never feel safe, right? Even when they're in the subway or in the, walking through the street, they're never safe, even though they're, not directly in the action.
Right. Even when they're trying to catch their breath, they're not.
Right.
The rest of the film, so that remaining hour, alternates between these high-strung cliffhanger chase scenes and what you just mentioned, these haunting, rattling moments of recovery, where they think it's respite, they're safe, they're not actively being chased by anything, but that's when the emotional processing starts. And I think that the film's tone, pacing, all of its characters, none of those things ever recover from that first shock. What maybe you could call the only jump scare of the movie, of the attack beginning.
Right.
Nothing ever returns from that moment. So all of those downtime scenes, yes, I guess the audience gets to catch their breath, but the more you watch them, the more you see this alternating format, the more you see that the characters are not bouncing back.
Mm-mm.
They're not recovering at all.
Mm-mm.
And for most horror, I would resent those kind of scenes on a rewatch. The downtime scenes, the recovery scenes, the exposition or character development. Like sometimes you don't look forward to those. You just want to be on the roller coaster.
Yeah.
You don't get new information. There's no monster. You don't get a cool set piece. But for Cloverfield, I think they are the secret to why the movie's so good. Because those are the moments that really disturbed me. You get these devastating character turns where people fall apart. They have to call a loved one and tell them someone died. Or they process the permanence of what's happening.
Yes, right. It's the people processing this whole event is what makes it so hard to watch. I mean, the character or the creature design is really, really good. Like the big alien is really freaky and well done, and the parasites are really freaky and terrifying. I mean, that scene in the tunnels is like one of the scariest things I've ever seen.
Yes.
But it's extra scary because of the human factor. And I think even what you said about how like the witch in The Shining, they take their time to set up the characters and show them treading water before you start to drown. I mean, if you look at this in the like proportionally, the movie is 80 minutes long. 20 minutes is a big chunk of 80 minutes. So that 20 minutes to build the characters, I think, is sort of comparable. I mean, it's certainly not a slow burn. You're right, it turns on a dime. But I think it's kind of bold to spend that long establishing your characters and not having a single moment that's unsettling or scary. Because a lot of times in a horror movie, you'll kind of open up and introduce the characters, but there's something off and you're like just waiting for something bad to happen.
Oh, this guy's going to go crazy later.
Yeah, but like that's not how this movie feels at all. I mean, I know it's a horror movie, so I'm waiting for the thing to happen, but there's nothing else going on that's like, oh, that's kind of weird or ominous or unsettling.
And then when you get those quiet moments, you almost return to the party scene where it is all about the characters.
But it's colored by everything else going on, so it's much higher stakes.
It's almost stained or poisoned, but because you got 20 straight minutes of seeing them act normally, the contrast is that much more devastating.
Right.
There's this bookend effect of the quiet scenes after the initial turn, when the shit hits the fan.
Totally.
Because you feel the terror of the previous scene that they just escaped from, and then when you go back into the next disaster, you have more to lose. It's brutal and effective, that kind of bookending, because it doesn't matter how many times they do it. It raises the stakes every time.
Right.
And I would argue that the quiet scenes are as much the point as the monster is.
Yes.
Because you've got these twin arcs by the end of the movie. It's not really a spoiler, but escape/kill the monster if you can, and get to Beth.
Yeah.
And those play in parallel to the point that they're completely linked by the end. And you know the movie can only end with both of those plot lines being resolved.
Right, of course. And the way that the movie stylistically plays with that by mirroring the footage of before the attack, like when at the Long Island or the Coney Island date.
Yes. Oh, devastating.
And the actual like footage of this event, like that mirroring I think is really nice.
The way they, after some characters aren't on the board anymore, the way they cut in old footage is incredible.
And ending the movie with Beth saying I had a really good day. Like,
yes,
you know,
yes. It's
that
punishing, but it is a character moment.
Totally. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of horror movies I've seen, they end with like the monster jumping at the screen.
Yeah.
Even Sinister did that.
They really shouldn't have done that, honestly. I think we've talked about that before. I think it kind of cheapened the movie, but anyway.
But let's talk about the scary scenes for a second. We've got the monsters, the chases, the combat occasionally, or attempted combat. I mean, these are all civilians. They don't become superheroes.
Yeah. I mean, you do see the military in active combat at one point, which is really interesting.
They're almost in the background, though.
Right.
Like, none of the principal characters, they kind of can kick things, but they also get hurt and die.
Right.
I don't think I've ever believed in a horror movie so much.
Right. I know it was like the effects were, I mean, part of it I think is they had the security blanket of the found footage. So it's like not super, super high quality, like, you know, HD cameras or whatever, but it doesn't like, regardless, the effects are incredible. And for 2008, like they hold up. A lot of CG in 2008 is kind of like, ew.
Most of the time when you have a budgetary limitation, it forces people to get creative.
Yeah.
And then you have to lean on these like eternal pillars of creative work.
Yes.
Like the power of suggestion. And that's the basis of the fear for most of this movie.
Yeah.
I remember thinking when this movie came out that, oh, you're never going to actually see the monster. It's all going to be these little teases and they're never going to show you the cool stuff.
Right. Oh, it's found footage and oh, how convenient. We never see it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was dumb in 2008. I didn't know anything. I did see The Dark Knight in theaters, and that was a cool experience, but I certainly wasn't ready for this at all.
No,
but
I would have not been ready for this at all.
When I say I believed in this movie, it's not just that I was immersed in the characters. I believed that anything could happen.
Yeah.
Because I saw these people's lives, which were so relatable and normal and simple
and almost mundane.
Almost like reality TV.
Yes, because at the beginning, like, a lot of the problems that these people are having feel kind of shallow.
Sure.
Like, I mean, this guy's moving to Japan, which I think is a nice homage to Godzilla. He's moving to Japan. But, like, it's like, it's just like, oh no, the relationships, oh, he likes her, she, oh no. Like, it feels so shallow, but then because of the events in the movie, it becomes so meaningful. And which is really impressive.
Yes. When everything goes sideways, you have about 60 minutes of horror. And within those 60 minutes, there are probably 20 set pieces of just things going ridiculously wrong. All of these new environments and situations and scenarios, it felt like they always had something huge and new and freaky to show you.
Yeah.
So I felt like anything could happen because it was constantly.
Yes.
But I also felt, maybe because I was immersed in these relatable characters, given the scale of this thing, the power of it, the mystique, that it wasn't explained. There was no old man teaching us the lore.
Right.
Well and truly fucked. I knew this was not going to have a good ending.
Yeah, no. And you hope so badly that it will, but it's not going to. And you can almost see it on all the actors' faces, the characters. They also know that it's not going to go well. And yet they still try to find Beth. And they do find her. And even when they do find her, because, like, I guess we should have said the top big time spoilers, but they find Beth and she's been impaled. Right. And so I thought, oh, well, she's going to die, or she's already dead. But she is not, in fact, dead. And they, like, get her out of there. And so they keep trying when it seems hopeless. And even though they kind of know this is useless, but what else am I going to do? So they just keep going.
The sense of scale is unbelievable. And I wasn't just feeling intimidated. If you have Leatherface running after the final girl, you feel worried. If you have Art the Clown kind of stalking through, you feel nervous. But there was something so confident about this creature. Every time you sensed its presence, we were in a packed theater. It was a sold out show. It was late at night. Everyone was there for the right reasons.
It was very fun.
And I had this real feeling of panic throughout the movie. It wasn't just empathy for the characters, because I did care about them and what happened to them. It felt like such a personal panic because they were pretty normal people with pretty normal, boring problems. And then they were just screwed. And there was almost nothing they could do to escape or protect anyone they loved. And they kept it so grounded, whether it was the dialogue, the reactions, the failures, that I felt so invested and involved. I believed in it so much that I agree with what you said earlier. I don't want to rewatch this.
No, I don't think I want to either.
The panic was... it sounds stupid to say I felt panicky during a horror movie, but this was so intense.
Yes, and I think at the beginning of the movie, or before it started, the guy announcing the movie and starting it off said that back in the day when this came out, there were, like, signs outside of the movie theaters that said, like, this movie may give you feelings that are comparable to what you feel on a roller coaster.
Right.
Which sounds so cheesy and like, ooh, it's a roller coaster of a film. It's scary, but, like, that is really how it felt. It was really intense.
And in prepping notes for this episode, the question became, why?
Why?
What did they do? Because we like to look at that sort of structural behind the scenes, the technical level.
Yeah.
And I think it's really one choice that makes it that personal. And here's where we transition into talking about found footage.
Yeah.
And the handheld camera work, because not all found footage is handheld. You have something like Paranormal Activity,
that's
security
like
cameras. So I think it is, and you can disagree with me on this, I think that most of the incredible immersion and character investment that we get in this story is thanks to that one choice.
Yeah.
Because it becomes essential to every important development in the movie.
Yes.
The way we reveal the monster, our limited knowledge of the creature design.
Right.
We get these slow reveals that it reminded me of the way Shelob is introduced in Return of the King.
Totally, yeah.
That chapter's incredible, by the way.
Yeah.
We did an episode on it, but it's this slow roll where you get fragments of the creature. Here in Cloverfield, we get fragments of an arm You see the weird crawly things that are falling off the monster.
The tail and
glimpses of it between buildings.
The
very
smallest glimpses.
Very curated shots.
Right.
I mean, obviously it's curated because they're creating something on the screen, but
of course,
by limiting your field of vision, they're giving you just certain fragments.
Right. Because if you, I'm sorry.
No, just to build this image in your mind, like they did in Jaws.
Right. Well, because I was going to say, like, if they'd filmed this, like a normal movie, not found footage style, I think doing those brief glimpses would have been a lot harder. It works in Jaws because you got the water, but even some of those shots in Jaws are filmed kind of like POV, either from the shark or the person. But I think, doing it found footage, it's just directly what our characters are seeing, and it adds to that panicky feeling. And I think the biggest thing this movie has to work against with the found footage is like, why on earth is this guy still rolling? But I mean, so they keep having to like justify it, but I think it works fine, especially because like people, especially now, people film everything. A horrible disaster will be happening, and like 80% of people have their phones out filming it. Like, people feel a need to document, and like and I think like at a certain point, T.J. Miller's character is like, well, we just got to keep doing this.
He says people will want to see this.
Exactly.
But there's also, I agree, it's a very human impulse, and I think part of it is almost, imagine him like looking back from what's happening and looking on the viewfinder, almost to check that it's real.
Sure, like he's not imagining it, right?
But also in this total free fall, it gives him some type of control,
and maybe it almost like creates a distance between him
a barrier
and what's happening.
Totally. It was. What did you think of the choice after all of these curated fragments? I thought it was going to be maybe at the end we get it, it jumps at the camera or something, we get a shot of its face. When we got sort of from behind, we got a far away zoomed out full body shot on the news footage in the store. On that TV when they were getting the phone battery. We saw most of the monster there on the news footage.
That's true.
And then we got a steady shot of the creature at the end. What did you think of that choice to fully show the monster eventually?
I'm glad that we got to fully see it. I think it's kind of cheap when you don't get to see it, because it's like you've already put this much investment in it and you've given us these teasers and we're not going to ever see what it looks like. I feel like that's kind of cheating. Although I do think that the very end where you see the full creature, that one is the most, I think, contrived in terms of he would continue filming. But it's a really cool creature and I don't mind it. And at that point, things have gone so crazy and it's so ridiculous what's happening, not in a bad way, but it's so much that you're kind of along with it. And also, I think it helps that that's not like the end of the movie. If it had just ended with him being eaten and that's it, I think that would have kind of sucked. But to then continue it beyond with Beth and Rob, I think made it, and to end it with them and not the monster, I think was crucial. So I liked it. What
type of monster shot was most affecting or freaky for you between the news footage, the handheld shaky cam, or the steady shot at the end?
It was actually in the tunnel with the shaky cam. So with
the night vision?
The night vision. Yeah. The second they said turn on the night vision, I just thought, oh no. I was like, it's not going to be good. I'm just flashing back to when we watched The Descent. Oof. But, oh gosh. But, it was those things up because they were so quiet, Also, they really reminded me of spiders, which I hate. So that freaked me out the most, I think. What about you?
I agree. I think it was the handheld because the fragments were so instinctually terrifying. It had that lizard braid thing of, when your eyes just pull to something because you sense movement.
Peripheral, movement.
That's what it was. It was this animal thing.
It's how you would be looking at this kind of thing.
Yes. So, and because those lingering shots at the end, I felt like they were balanced appropriately. I didn't think they felt contrived. Yeah. Because the stillness after so much movement and tension, it felt so desolate and vacant and almost awed at the power and enormity of this thing. It felt, especially at the end in the final shot, it felt appropriately hopeless.
Yeah, and if you've felt like so much uncertainty and confusion for so many hours and only gotten glimpses, and you do finally see it, you are going to just stare at it in awe and terror and like paralysis.
You're short-circuiting.
Yeah. So it made sense,
Another question for you. Why is this monster scary? Because you alluded to it before. There are similarities to... I mean, it's like a cross between a spider and a bat. It's got these freaky legs, teeth,
the parasites.
eyes. What is it? Well, no, even the big guy.
The big guy too. Yeah. I mean, well, it's that it's unfamiliar. and huge. But I mean, here's the thing. The scariest part for me in this movie is not the creatures. I mean, the creatures are very scary, especially the parasites that have this like, you know, unnaturally fast, too many legs, weird freaky movements, and the fact that their bites cause what happens to
oh yeah.
What is her name? Oh my gosh.
That was the girl who exploded.
Yeah,
that was
name?
rough.
I can't remember her name.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I was not paying
Janice
attention to names.
in Mean Girls. I can't remember her name, but she has like a long name in the movie. Anyway, like that's pretty freaky. Yeah. But also the other thing is just, I mean, it's alien, right? It looks kind of like an underwater thing, but it's got too many teeth. It's too big. It's too well equipped. It's got a tail. It makes weird noises. Like, you know, I mean, that's as far as it goes for me, beyond what I'd like to talk about in a minute.
Because I think it reminded me a little bit of the Lord of the Rings movies, because it felt like it was that caliber of CG.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a lot of CG in, you know, hundreds of $1 million movies where they've got all the money in the world and it looks visually stunning. It's impressive. It's so detailed. But it doesn't look real. Right. It's just missing some sort of presence. It's hard to find the right word for it. But I thought all of the monsters, whether it's the little freaky subway beasts or the big boy, they all had this speed and, more importantly, a sense of weight to them.
Yeah.
Because the big guy, they behind the scenes, we read all the trivia on the way home. They said that this monster is a baby who's like thrashing around New York looking for its mother or trying to escape or survive.
Yeah.
And it has that sense of speed because it's alone and thrashing around in a strange place. It has the panic and desperation of like a cornered animal.
Yeah.
And as we got closer to the end of the movie, and I got more wide shots of the monster, and I hadn't heard that piece of trivia, obviously, but there's something, it's apparent a little bit while you're watching it that this thing doesn't look fully formed. It doesn't look all scaly and bruised and leathery like Godzilla does.
Sure.
There is something youthful. It almost looks like when animals are just born.
Yeah,
and they're all lanky.
They still got placenta on them.
Yeah,
and,
they're all lanky and goofy looking.
Yeah,
this was like that, but with the worst bat face you've ever seen.
It was so like bastardized and perverted.
And sensing that desperation of a cornered animal, realizing that that's the same sensation that you're empathizing with in the main characters,
right,
makes the situation.
And,
it almost lends some tragedy to it.
Yes.
Right. And it's not King Kong. You're not sympathizing with the monster here.
Right. Not so much.
You get it to the degree that, a cornered animal is the most dangerous. Everyone knows that.
Yes.
Right?
Like that, because it's unpredictable and it's going to do anything it can to survive. Right.
Which makes it such a different kind of monster. I mean, you and I talked about Quiet Place and all these other kind of similar films on the way home.
Right.
But versus a lot of the horror movies you and I like, this monster was not sadistic. No. It wasn't this controlled terror of a calm, like, Hellraiser monster that's torturing its victims.
He wasn't, like, seeking out. It wasn't like Leatherface, like, stalking his prey. Right.
Jason, even. And to go back to another Summerween movie from last year, if The Strangers is the best version of that type of horror with calm, controlled terror,
sure,
I think Cloverfield might be the mountaintop for savage, writhing horror.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Because you don't see the big boy do that so much. He's more of the presence. But that subway scene.
Oh my God.
I've never seen anything like that.
It was so scary. It was so upsetting. Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful analysis. I think if this is a great time to move into like the final and I think most key reason why I think this movie was so scary was because the way it was shot and everything, it is a clear homage to 9/11. Like the way that the footage appears, the way that people, I mean, number one, it's this big disaster in New York City, but it was beyond that. It was like just the way it sounded, the way it looked, the way that people were running from collapsing buildings, and there was so much confusion and panic and people like covered in dust. It was in this, handheld, normal person, civilian footage. And like the way you talked about, like a few minutes ago, we talked about how these characters are so, like their problems are so mundane and boring, that like quotidian boringness is so a part of all of the like victim stories and artifacts and like personal items that were found after. It was things that were just like so boring, just like a wallet or like a pen, but it carries so much human weight to it because it's so like so normal that makes it really, really scary. And so it was like the entire time we were watching this, I was like, I feel like I'm watching a 9/11 documentary, but like on an extreme scale. It was so upsetting and it felt so real. And obviously we've never been attacked by an alien, and I hope, but I don't think we ever will. And, you know, the Statue of Liberty head flying into the center of the city is the extreme version of the World Trade Center, this like symbol of American power and success collapsing. Like, it's so similar, but just like ramped up to this extreme degree. Was really, really hard to watch. And even when they're going up to rescue Beth, when they're climbing all those stairs, like all I can think about is the firefighters climbing the stairs. When they get Beth out and they're crossing over to the other building and Rob says, "Don't look down," I was thinking of Moira Smith, who was the only female police officer to die in New York on 9/11. And she had been helping people evacuate the South Tower, and she kept everybody very calm. And like they were like, she was in the lobby and people were trying to, you know, look out and like look at what was happening. And she just said like, "Don't look, just keep going." And she would like block the way. She ended up being in the tower when it collapsed. But like that, like just these little similarities that did not feel accidental. This is 7 years after 9/11, but people are very much still processing it at this time. We're still in Iraq and Afghanistan at this time. It was really sad and hard to watch. And I think that's why it upset me so much. It's not just because I cared about these people. I cared about what's happening to them. The monsters were scary. The way it was shot was scary. It was, this feels like a real thing that happened in a different way, but it really felt like that. And even you mentioned that we watched so much, I mean, growing up, and people older than us too, we watched so much footage of soldiers in Iraq, and like that, again, that handheld horrible disasters happening. Like because this is like during the age when the internet is on a huge rise, smartphones, like it was so much easier to watch just footage of everything and just have so much easy access to this kind of thing. That's really all I could think about, which was really upsetting.
If I can just add something.
Sure.
You're reminding me of something, the idea of processing something like this, like 9/11 through art. We were watching this little mini documentary on YouTube yesterday about American Psycho. And I think American Psycho is effective social commentary, parody, satire, because it is so over the top and exaggerated. Yes. And I think you need that contrast. You need that extremity to force you to reflect, to look at the gulf of what between what the art is presenting and what you identify with. Yes. And that reminded me of one of the pieces of trivia for Cloverfield, when you see the head of the Statue of Liberty, which is the first icon you see that's ruined for New York. The first
that really ramps it up.
It's kind of the first moment that the movie takes place in New York instead of just vague city.
Yes.
They made the head a lot bigger than it is.
Yeah.
Because they wanted that sense of scale and comparison. And maybe that is the most pointed moment of exaggeration.
Yes, because it both ramps it up in that exaggerated way, but it also simplifies it, which makes it easier to process.
Right.
Because the biggest, like one of the, you know, it was such a complicated situation, and it was, you know, the easiest thing is always to pin it on one bad guy and like make it, okay, it's this person's fault, so they will pay and that will be it. And that's what this movie does. It's this one alien who brings these parasites with him, but it's one alien, one bad guy, you destroy that bad guy and you're all good. And so it was like it's simplified and ramped up to aid in that process.
You've got the fear of the other.
Yes.
And it's not even like Top Gun Maverick, where the enemy is just an unknown country. Right. This time it's something from another planet that can't talk. It's faceless and nameless. It's just the other.
Another like interesting thing I was thinking about, this movie's 80 minutes long. So for a little 9/11 day of timeline, the first plane hits the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. About 80 minutes after that is 10:02 a.m. Okay. 10:06 a.m. is when the fourth and final hijacked flight, Flight 93, lands in Pennsylvania. So you could argue that the 9/11 attacks last about 80 minutes. I mean, if you add another, 26-ish minutes, that's when the North Tower finally collapses. So add that. But like the attacks themselves, of like the planes crashing, is about 80 minutes long. And obviously this Cloverfield timeline takes place over several hours because it's not real-time footage. It's cut. But I just thought that was really interesting as well. And of course, IMDb tells us that 80 minutes is the length of a long-running mini DV tape, which is a common format used in consumer camcorders. So you've got that double thing with the 80 minutes. And it makes total sense that it's like this way to process this huge disaster and attack, which is of course what Godzilla was. It comes 9 years after Hiroshima. So it makes a lot of sense to that sort of be mirroring itself there. I think the other way that this movie is so, I don't know, powerful is
poignant.
It's when it comes out. It comes out in 2008. So it's of course 7 years after 9/11. America's very much still processing. But it's also, the same year as the financial crash of 2008. And this movie came out in January of 2008. So I don't mean that this is a reaction to the financial crash, because how could it be, right? Anything I'm about to say now is not like the filmmakers knew. I just mean that it's interesting if you think about where it lands in history. So it's very much like it comes at the end of the Bush era and I'm talking about America here, obviously, but it comes at the beginning of the Obama era, who is the Democratic reaction to the Bush era, and it's sort of like is this new direction for America. But of course you have the financial crash, which throws everybody for a loop, but I think especially impacts millennials who were like 5 to 10 years older than we are, who were in high school when 9/11 happened. And then the second they enter the adult world, there's an economic crash.
The job market, sure.
And it just totally, like, all promises of hard work being rewarded are shot. And you sort of end up with this nihilism of these people who, because we were in second grade when 9/11 happened. And so we talked about this today. Like, we didn't really understand what was going on. We knew it happened. We remember it, but we didn't process what it was until many years later when we were old enough to understand. But people, like, imagine being in high school when this happens. I mean, that's got to mess up your entire worldview to only then enter the working world as an adult, and it's 2008. I think it creates this really nihilistic generation of people. And then fast forward a few more years, like 2010 is when people are really starting to recognize, like in a big vocal visual way, they're starting to recognize and respond to systemic injustices. And so people really like seize on what they can control. And that's when you get the Tumblr SJWs and you get BuzzFeed and you get Twitter really ramping up and Facebook news. And also that's when like our younger millennial generation is in high school now, and we can also join in on the internet, and we want to be able to control things. And that's when you get the birth of like the of wokeism and all that, and so the people are seizing on what they can control.
You get sort of this it's sort of a culture of reactionary politics.
Yeah, exactly.
Look at the echo chamber of the last couple months with like the Bud Light thing or whatever the like cause du jour is.
This would not have happened in 2008.
But it's immediate, polarizing, hating, demonizing the opposition. They're the biggest threat to the country.
Right, because you get this like this birth of this like interest in seeking justice, sure. Right? But then you get to 2016 and you get to just the internet exploding in a way it never has, and culture wars, and it all starts to unravel.
And you see the effect of everyone having a camera.
Right.
You see the most horrific things in the world every time you open social media.
Even more than you did in the early 2000s. And so, like, my point here is that we're at this junction. Like, this movie comes at this junction between the shock of 9/11 and the growing nihilism that was like already creeping up and was then propelled and pushed forward even more by the 2008 crash, and this like striving towards these solutions of the 2010s, which didn't work out how people thought they would. And so it's just right in this middle of like shock evolving into nihilism, and yet the two main characters of this movie, Rob and Beth, choose not to give up and continue to try until the very end. They don't win, but in many ways they do. And I think that's just really, really interesting. Like rather than, because I think if you made Cloverfield now, your main characters would try to stop the monster and try to save everybody and try to stop the injustice, right? But instead, like, that's so clearly not possible for these two individuals. And so it's about them. I mean, that's the thesis statement that is said right before the attack happens, is hold on to the people you love and care about. And that's what they choose to do, even though they end up dying at the end.
I talked about the element of tragedy that enters into the film sort of halfway through. There's an element of romance there from the very beginning. And I do love that is the through line.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure people sneer at it. And I think if you made it today, you wouldn't have quite the same attitude. I think there's sort of, whether you called it a nihilism or a cynicism or that sense in the culture now.
Yeah.
I don't think you'd have that heart that you had in 2008 here.
Right. I totally agree.
You hadn't been flattened and knocked out on the map, down on the mat 40 extra times like we have since 2008.
Yeah.
With all the other crises and pandemics and disasters. And
I didn't even talk about the pandemic that then came later. Yeah, right.
Yeah, we hadn't had that yet. So there was a bit of hope there.
Right.
Even though I called the end of the film hopeless, which it is.
It is, but it isn't, you know? And on paper, it's so cheesy. Like, oh, well, they died, but they loved each other at the end.
But aren't all romantic stories tragic? Because at the end of the day, one of them has to die?
Right, sure.
Or both of them, I guess, eventually.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a perfect time capsule. It's a reflection of its era. I think it pulls me back to that time and what was going on in the culture. But again, when we talk about exaggeration, it also points out how much has shifted since 2008.
Totally.
And like 10 Cloverfield Lane, because they've made a couple other ones.
Yeah.
10 Cloverfield Lane has all of the suspicion and paranoia and fear and isolation that the world has had since 2008. I think that's another perfect representation of the time in which it was. I think that was like right around 2016.
I was going to say that was, I remember we were like either in college or we had just finished. So
it was right around that time. And we haven't seen the third one, but they're making a new one. And Matt Reeves, who's not directing it, and he's busy with the Batman thing, he's talked about the new one and how it has to be shaped by COVID.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah. And like, you know, we've talked before about how like I don't want to see a movie about COVID, and yet Pearl was an amazing movie about COVID, even though it wasn't about COVID. In the same way that Cloverfield is not about 9/11, but it totally
So
is.
was Inside with Willem Dafoe. We've done episodes on both of those
Inside
things.
was about COVID, yeah. So I think that, doing a Cloverfield movie that responds to COVID, I think would make
But how do you do
sense.
a viral thing and still see the cool monster? I don't know.
Yeah, you can. Maybe it turns you into monsters, kind of
interesting.
Walking Dead style.
Then you get even more monsters.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't want it to be a zombie movie. That's boring.
No,
and I don't think that's what it would be.
We've done zombies to death in the last.
We sure have.
I don't know. 10 years? I feel like we went from vampires to zombies and then we just sort of petered out.
Yeah, now it's just
grief is the
elevated
monster.
horror. Ooh, the real monster is grief. Yeah, but no, I mean this
we do like those too.
I know, it's like I always make fun of it, but like I so love it.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I love it. Anyway, no, this movie was fantastic. Like, I mean, if for some reason you haven't seen it and you listened to this whole thing, sorry we ruined it, but you should still watch it.
No, we didn't though, because like
you will never be prepared.
I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm a loser, and if I like doing little deep dives.
Yeah,
I like my research. I like my looking up things. And I have looked up the Cloverfield monster 100 times, just because people have always talked about this in such whispered, elevated tones.
So you knew what it looked like.
I knew what it looked like. I'd seen a lot of the freeze frames that you get in the movie, and I thought, oh, okay, it's this weird kind of insecty bat thing, and it looks like it has these stilted arms, and it's got this beaky thing, like whatever, that looks stupid. And I'm gonna watch a whole movie to get a collective 10 seconds of this dumbass this movie scared the shit out of me.
Yeah,
it didn't matter how much I saw, and you do see
lot.
plenty. You see much more than you think you're going to.
Yeah,
the movie's incredible.
I also cried a lot. I don't cry in horror movies usually, but I cried in this movie. I mean, for all the reasons I outlined earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, this one is pretty devastating, and I think it's a great start for Summerween because it's a new thing that I feel like I know more about the genre. I know more about what I like and the influences, the legacy of this film.
I'm really trying to give myself a good horror movie education. Not even
exactly.
not just with Summerween, just in my life, but this is a great excuse to do it. So
we cover horror anyway. Sorry, I don't know what's happening with my throat.
It's falling apart.
I have the viral Cloverfield from the new movie.
Oh no.
We cover horror anyway, as it happens occasionally. But the fun for me of Summerween is the concentrated timeline.
Right, and the way that all the way that I've like seen one movie informs the way I talk about the other one.
Exactly. If you go back and listen to last year's episodes, they are all in conversation with each other.
Totally.
And I'm excited for us to get into that this year. We have
too.
a short list of about 10 movies, but that's fluid and some of that could change. So again, send us your recommendations. You guys know what we like by now. All of it's out there. Everything we've ever enjoyed, we've done an episode on.
And these Summerween episodes are coming out every other Friday because on the other Fridays we do The Witcher. So, just every other Friday, keep an eye out.
And then we do bonus episodes on some Tuesdays.
Yes.
Cool.
And a lot of our bonus content is on Substack as well. So even more stuff there. So yeah. I guess that's it.
That's
yes. If
it.
you have movie
Cloverfield.
recommendations, send them our way. And stay safe from aliens. And make sure you record it though if it does happen.
You know what's sad though?
What?
It was nice to go back to New York in the movie.
Even if it's New York falling apart.
It was kind of nice.
It was kind of nice. I was like, oh,
it was nicer
bridge.
in the Spider-Man game because I wasn't dying.
Well, that does make a difference.
But this was still kind of nice. I don't know.
We'll be back someday.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.